So I'll be starting in Andy after that. So he's the first. So it'll be Andy, and then Mariah, and then Will. Yeah. Oh, just should I test it? Testing. You hear me? Okay. I think we're ready to start then, if that works for you. Okay. Okay. Hello, Green Jeans. Hey, everybody. Welcome. How's everybody doing tonight? Thank you to all of you who showed up here to make Nerd Night what it is. So who all has been to a Nerd Night before? Can I hear just a whoop or a hand or a... Okay, a lot of whoops. Who has not been to a Nerd Night before? Okay, got some whoops here too. Excellent. So for the latter group, we've got some explanatory text here. First to start with, who am I? I am Nat Baca. I'll be your host tonight. That's me in the center with this head thing. There are three of us who really kind of worked to put this together, and recently actually we have a fourth as well. So Andrew over here on video. Awesome, thank you, Andrew. So we are going to be live streaming this event to Facebook. This is new for us. We did this last time, so this is 1.5 times we're doing this. And off to the left here is Rob. He can't make it tonight, but he's a sometimes host. And on the right is Andy, who's here. Thank you all. We're all volunteers. We don't get paid to do this. We just enjoy doing it and enjoy putting this event on for you all. But this is made possible through Green Jeans and Santa Fe Brewing. So can we get a round of applause for the venue here? Thank you. Related to this, there is actually a raffle tonight. So if you haven't already, take a chance to head over to this table. We have a raffle ticket, and the prize is going to be this growler right here, filled with a pour of your choice. We will be doing the drawing at the end of the event, so do come up sometime between now and the end and get a sense, or pick up your ticket. So what is Nerd Night? Nerd Night is going to be, you're going to hear 3 talks tonight, 3.5, because there'll be a little mini thing at the front. And it's going to be about 2 hours or so it'll be about 15 minutes between each talk, so there'll be a break if you want to get out, get some drinks, relax, etc. But we are part of a grand tradition. I think that's worth noting here. This Nerd Night has been going since 2003. So these are all the Nerd Nights located in the United States. We have a bunch in Germany as well. Recently, Australia has taken off. So this event has been going for 20 years. Our Albuquerque chapter of this, we started this about a year ago, a little more than a year. So this is our 13th total event. The basic idea, we bring some nerds up, they talk about nerdy stuff, and you guys drink along. It's a very simple concept, but hopefully you enjoy yourselves with these, they're meant to entertain, but also to inform. So to give you a sense of what these things are like, we'd like to start off with a mini talk. So our mini talk tonight, I'm going to talk through this one. WTF is a maypole and other May traditions. So it is May now. That means a few things. Spring is in full bloom, flowers are coming out, and animals are doing it. But May, in particular, has specific significance to people around the world, weird festivals. So join me on a weird mini Nerd Night talk about very specific ways that people celebrate the beginning of the middle of spring. So let's start with May Day. And let me say up front that by May Day, I don't actually mean the International Workers' Day. Although this is actually worth a small digression. Could be actually its own talk, specifically why 150 world countries celebrate Labor Day on May 1st, and only the US, Canada, and Trinidad and Tobago celebrate in September. So if I were to give that talk, I would tell you that this is actually even more odd because the events that inspired May Day, namely the agreement to commit to an 8-hour workday, down from 10, and the Haymarket riot actually happened in the US. So it turns out this was a very intentional move by this guy, Grover Cleveland, because he was worried that having actual Labor Day on May 1st and making it actually international would mean we have to deal with the workers of the world actually uniting, which would be bad for business. So in researching this talk, I discovered And actually, May 1st is a holiday in the US, but it is not known as May Day. It is called Loyalty Day, and was explicitly designed to be a patriotic counter to May Day. So thank Grover Cleveland for that one. So happy Loyalty Day to all of you. But that's a talk for another day. So for the purposes of today, May Day refers to the spring holiday, which also happens to be on May 1st and is celebrated throughout Europe largely, although other parts of the world also. This coincidental holiday was established on May 1st because it's exactly halfway between spring equinox and the midsummer solstice. This holiday is actually ancient. No one actually knows where it came from or where it originated. They suspect it actually goes back to 1200 BC and the celebration and veneration of trees and the worship of trees. So one of the earliest reported ancestors of May Day is the Roman celebration of Floralia, depicted on the left here. This is a celebration of the goddess Flora. Flora was the goddess of flowers and the harvest, but also the goddess of prostitutes. And so this festival celebrated both of these. So it took place during 6 days from the end of April into May. And during this festival, people just straight up got drunk and naked, and that was how you celebrated this holiday. There was naked dancing, naked gladiatorial fights, naked chariot races. They have what were called the Florian Games, during which everything was naked. So people released goats and rabbits into the street and chased after them, also naked. And then people threw beans at the naked people. That was kind of what you did in ancient Rome. So yeah, that's Floralia. So come the Middle Ages, a new element was added, fire. So in Germanic holidays, in Germanic countries, the day before May 1st was christened Walpurgisnacht to celebrate the Saint Walpurga. And in Gaelic culture, this day became Beltane. The idea was basically the same, fire. The idea is to light bonfires so as to bless cattle and other livestock as they moved into their summer pastures. So this is traditionally seen as actually the beginning of summer. Right now we think of the beginning of summer a month from now, but traditionally it was today. Over time they added a tradition of forcing the cattle to jump over the fires as a means of protecting their milk from being stolen by fairies. So of course people themselves would also jump over these fires. And that tradition continues today. I was in Denmark a couple years ago, and just bonfires literally everywhere, just drunk teenagers and bonfires. So that's how they do it in Denmark. So best known modern May Day tradition revolves around a thing called the maypole, as depicted here in this painting from the 16th century. Turns out no one knows what the maypole is or where it came from, but the idea is really simple. You find a long pole and stand it up, and you can optionally decorate it with flowers. The maypole was dedicated as a sign that the happy season of warmth and comfort has returned. But beyond this, people debate what the actual purpose of the maypole is and what it represents. So one scholar claims it's the axis of the world. So this joins the heavens and the earth, represents the world tree, and represents the kind of holy, joining of these regions and realms. Others claim that it's in fact a phallic symbol. So evidence of this is actually pretty light. Many people don't believe this, but I want to believe. So the idea is you erect this pole, you tie some ribbons to it, and then you dance around it. The dance is performed by pairs of boys and girls, or men and women, who stand alternately around the base of this pole, each holding a bit of a ribbon. They weave in and around one another, boys going one way, girls going the other, and that's it. That's the whole thing. But for some reason, people love doing this in Northern Europe. Part of this day also involves crowning a May Queen. So she's the one who rides at the front of the parade, the May Day parade. She wears a white gown to symbolize purity, and she begins the May Day celebrations. Her companion is this guy, the Green Man, and he was added later. He's just sort of spring. He's just spring. So I would be remiss in this celebration of weird Maytime rituals without covering another festival, which I'll cover here, which is El Colacho. So this is a traditional Spanish festival dating to 1620. During this festival, men dressed as the devil, in this case known as El Colacho, dressed in red and yellow suits and run through town, and villagers hurl insults at them to chase away evil. They run all the way around each town, and the run culminates in them jumping over babies who are lying on mattresses in the streets. So these are all the babies who were born in the last 12 months. And the devils hold whips and oversized castanets as they jump over the children. The jump represents the devils being driven out, and the Colacho absorbs their sins. So it's sort of a baptism, actually. So incredibly, no baby has ever been hurt by the El Colacho celebrations, which I was really glad to see. And after the jumps, priests will sprinkle the tops with rose petals to bless them. It's worth noting the Pope does not approve of this. He says this is not an approved mechanism of baptism. I don't know if the new Pope approves of this. This is a good question. At least the old Pope disapproved of this. So yeah, but I think this version's a bit more fun. Meanwhile, in Japan, they have what is called the Naki Sumo Crying Baby Festival. This has been held also for over 400 years. During this festival, babies are held in the arms of sumo wrestlers in an open-air sumo ring. Two babies compete in a match to see which child is the first to cry, who is then proclaimed the winner. If both children cry at the same time, the baby with the louder cry is typically the victor. So sumo wrestlers employ a variety of techniques to encourage the crying, including bouncing the baby in the arms, throwing it up in the air, making loud noises, and crying "naki, naki, naki," which means cry, cry, cry. So whether the baby has cried, so when the baby doesn't cry for several minutes, they bring in a goblin character who's wearing a goblin mask, who is, can help the crying process move along. So anyways, this concludes our short presentation on weird stuff people do in May. Whether throwing beans at naked people, setting things on fire to avoid fairies, dancing around the maypole, or jumping over a bunch of babies on a mattress, or forcing two infant children to cry at one another, here's wishing you all a happy May and a fruitful harvest. Thank you. All right, so on to our main events here, and our first speaker is Andy Torres. Andy Torres is an artist, business owner, and event organizer based in Albuquerque, who's dedicated to bringing people together and making life a little more fun. He's the founder of Mobius Theory, a lifestyle brand where he creates bold, iconic designs blending creativity and community through his background, spanning architecture, technology, and design. He's also a Nerd Nite Co-Organizer, so everybody give it up for Andy.
Hi, how's everybody doing? Alright. Can everyone hear me okay? Alright. Louder? Okay.
This one over here doesn't seem to have much sound.
We'll do a quick little sound check here. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
There you go.
Alright. Okay, so I'm not a professional at this at giving talks, so I'm going to rely on my notes a lot. Sorry for that. All right, so I grew up in New York City. My family's Puerto Rican. I'm Puerto Rican. I'm a first generation Puerto Rican. I grew up in the housing projects in Brooklyn, New York, and that is a place that informed a lot about like environment and architecture and what that effect is on just living and growing up. So that doesn't matter a whole lot except for the fact that it was just an inspiration for me. I wound up going to architecture school. I didn't finish, but I've always maintained a spectator attitude toward architecture and the built environment, things like urban planning. So cities have always fascinated me in that sense. So this talk is going to be really, I promise I know about this subject, but it's not going to sound like it because I'm going to be a little bit loose and draw some conclusions. But a lot of it that you're about to hear is historical, and it's not personal. I just want to just warn you up front that anything I'm about to say doesn't have anything to do with anyone here or you or really anyone in the past 100 years. This is something that has gone on in American cities for a very long time from the top level down, and we have almost very little control over that. So the fact of where you live and how you live is very little bearing on control over this scenario. So I just want to say that up front. The other thing is this talk obviously is not comprehensive. It's not meant to bring about guilt. It's not meant to bring about even any kind of real change immediately to what you're doing. I think there's some things at the end that I'll talk about, and there's some connections that I'll draw, but they're not really. I just want it to be fun as well. So as far as redlining, I'm just curious if anyone doesn't know what that term is here. Okay. I assume everyone knows what gentrification is at some point. I assume that there are probably not a lot of people who are find gentrification to be a positive thing. So you'll discover, hopefully, through this. What I discovered myself in this is that gentrification and redlining are basically lovers, and that one would not have happened without the other. In this case, gentrification, and may make some of you even more mad at gentrification, but it would not be possible without 100 years of government laws from the federal government down instituting how neighborhoods look, which is sounds surprising, but I promise all of this is documented. It's historical. There's language even today that you can find in documents that dictate who can live where, who can buy property, and what types of businesses would be in certain neighborhoods. So when you think about places like the war zone compared to Sandia Heights, there's a reason why, and they're not just they're not random, but there's a reason why some of those neighborhoods are so contrasted, and they're dictated by some of these government laws. They're not technically, they're technically no longer laws in the books, but the effects of them still go on today. So we'll go from there. So the first part is to define what redlining is. And I'm sorry if this is hard to read, but redlining is the government practice of denying services to a certain group of people in specific areas of American cities. Those services could be anything from mortgage lending, which is the main driver of redlining, but also they have to do with the types of businesses that can open up in an area, such as supermarkets, banks, schools, and parks. And this government agency started in the 30s. It was called the Homeowners Loan Corporation. What it did was lay out maps in American cities that literally dictated what type of people could own property. And that sounds drastic, and I know that sounds like something from several hundred years ago, but the effects of that are still happening even today, like literally this year. Let me show you an example. So this may be hard to see. I don't expect this to be very clear, but the maps of American cities, there's about Albuquerque. There's not one for Albuquerque, but like very many of the cities in America right now, you could find maps from the 30s and 40s. Redlining maps are laid out, and you'll be able to see certain areas where they're color-coded. Red is bad, yellow is becoming bad, green is good, and blue is quite a little bit good, but not quite as good. Green is the best, obviously. So red. So I'm gonna use some language, and it's not going to be too crazy, but I just need to emphasize that this is just what is in the books. Basically, if you went to any of these areas in American cities and looked at certain areas that were dictated as red or even yellow, that meant that banks would not give you a mortgage if you were of African or Asian descent. And in some cases, other immigrants or Jewish or anything that's non-white. This had the profound effect of making ghettos, essentially. Like this created inner cities full of food deserts and crime that persist to this day. So when areas in any city, Albuquerque included, have good areas and bad areas, they're by design. They're not random. Let me show you specifically Los Angeles. And you can see the large areas where there are red and yellow, and then there are areas that are green and blue that are, even to this day, they're up in the hills. And I'm not an expert on LA, I'm more of an expert on New York, so I can't speak to like how this has evolved. But you can see where, and these are government maps, right? So this isn't just someone deciding what they think is a bad area. And very literally, red means people that aren't white. That's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. So in these areas, again, they have underfunded schools, food deserts because of the lack of supermarkets, and because of that, other businesses avoided these areas. So you don't have anything else. So going back to the check cashing place, you have places like that are opening up in place of banks. You have predatory lending, you have bodegas instead of supermarkets, you have a limited selection of food, and the list goes on and on. I'll let you use your, you don't even have to use your imagination. You can see the effects of this in any American city. Now, the other city I want to focus on that I'll show you, some of the effects of this kind of thing with New Orleans. So New Orleans has its own map, and some of the areas that are red, you will notice in a strange way, correspond to the damage of substantial damage that was done after Katrina. This map on the right, and I know not everyone can see this, but the map on the bottom right, Oh, thank you. The map on the bottom right, there's 3 areas here that I saw were interesting that had the most prominence of demolished buildings following Katrina. That means for various reasons they were already in a period of neglect, and they sustained the most damage. To show you a little bit more, if I overlap the map, the redlining map of New Orleans that corresponds with the significant damage done after Katrina in New Orleans, it's almost a one-to-one, where you can see some of these areas like the 9th Ward and some of these areas that are like were significantly flooded. In other words, they were more protected, which is a direct result of, and I'm not getting into conspiracy. I'm just talking about what was in effect with the damage done to the city, what was protected, how the levees were designed, to protect some parts of the city but not others. That's just that's not conspiracy. That's just laid out. The Army Corps of Engineers is very clear about like what they dictated. That's since theoretically been fixed since then because of some problems after Katrina, but you know, we'll see. So that's an interesting example. And the other thing I wanted to talk about is some of the stuff that was specific to Albuquerque. So let me. The history of Albuquerque, or in New Mexico in general, has to do with the African Americans that left the South after the Civil War, and then there was also an influx of Chinese and Japanese immigrants. And this is the case throughout the country, especially in the West. As the country expanded, you had a lot of people, a lot of non-white families that were moving into these cities, and it created a case where people did not want these families living in their areas. So there were laws created, in part related to the redlining laws. Like one law in 1921, which voters adopted and helped vote on, was called the Alien Land Ownership Amendment to the New Mexico Constitution. It barred people of Asian descent from owning and leasing real estate. This stifled, there was a much larger Chinese population then than there was now, and it stifled a lot of that growth because of that sentiment. So they were unable to expand and build and grow families here, so they moved on. So what happens is that you had laws in the books that were basically had language in their deeds that said
if you were Asian or black, that you could not own or even live in this area. Here's an example of some of the deeds that are in place. This one example is from 1926, the other is from 1946. I'll read you one. It says, no person of Oriental or African descent shall reside in this premises. This deed on the right says the same. It also adds you can't have more than three people with tuberculosis living in the residence at the same time. So it's just as bad. The funny thing is, which is not funny, but if you bought a house today, for example, in Huning Castle or some places in Sandia Heights, deeds will still have this language in there. But it's dismissed because of the Civil Rights Act of 1968. However, that language is still there. So it's problematic because it shouldn't be there. However, there's been efforts to remove that language. In particular, I'm not trying to pick on anyone that lives in the Huning Castle area, but they have made efforts to try to remove that language from, for example, from the Huning Castle Neighborhood Association. They're still working on it. It's 2025. Here's another map of Brooklyn, New York. So this map, these correspond with each other. They're not related. I did not make the map on the right. It's technically not so accurate anymore with the gentrification of Brooklyn. However, you can see some of the corresponding areas that are quote okay and quote good. They correspond nicely to the color coding of who and what can live where. So, so you know, it's all by design in a sense. The other, I want to jump ahead to what this translates into, because really, this is a big topic. It's basically a college course. It's not going to be something that I could easily talk about in 15 minutes. What it translates into, just to segue a little bit into architecture, is you know, this is an example of what American cities basically look like all over the country. You have the areas that were blue and green start to look like the houses on the right, and the areas that were red start to look like the house on the left. So there's a lot of neglect, even to this day. It's changing somewhat, but it's changing somewhat because of gentrification. And gentrification is only really possible because you have the double whammy effect of an area that people have to reside in because they can't live anywhere else. And then that brings the property prices down so that other people, traditionally whites, can move in and take advantage of lower property prices and improve or drive up the price, which is then, so you have the double whammy of segregation plus displacement, which is happening all over the country. It happens in several cycles through cities like New York, for example, and it's, you know, it's happening everywhere. So this is a little bit of a segue, but in terms of what houses should look like, can you see okay? This happens a little, so the effect of redlining expands cities. Cities like Atlanta, LA are an extreme form where suburbs expand outwards, lots get bigger, houses get bigger, and houses get more insane. The layout of those suburbs gets a little bit more problematic. You rely on cars a lot more. So what you lose is that close-knit community, which is the foundation of houses, not just in the past 100 years, but just through all of history. So houses not necessarily should look like this, but they have a front porch, they have a door, they have a gathering space. You're able to greet people. This somewhat has a bit of a southern charm to it. It's not really specific to that. If I show you a picture of even 100 years ago, an adobe house in New Mexico, it's the same concept. You have people, you have the hearth outside, you have people gathering outside. It's very opening and inviting. And it's not just an American thing, too. This is just human civilization in general. Here's a house from the 1st century, the 1st century, in what is present-day Palestine. You'll see the same thing. The house is basically one room. There's a lot of open space outside. It's very inviting and warm. When you have the ripple effect of everything I described, right, and you have people living farther away, relying on their cars, the houses become more for the car than the person. So you have the driveway, which is one of my biggest pet peeves about some of the, just architecturally about suburban homes, is that the driveway becomes the focus of the house. So you see, the first thing you see when you pull up to a house in some neighborhoods is the driveway, not the front door. There's no porch. Everything happens behind the wall, your fence. Everything's private. There's no interacting with your neighbors. Here's another form of just the garage being very prominent. And you notice in this case, in this picture, the door, the front door, is very hidden. It's very dark and uninviting to me. But this is also an architectural standpoint. And in fact, in a lot of times, you're entering the house through the garage. You're not even going through the front door. And this is an extreme case where you don't even see the front door. It's just like just, I don't even know what's going on here. And then the most extreme form are these monstrosities, which are called McMansions. The reason I think part of the reason that they are called McMansions is because of the homogenized view of. So here, let me go back to. If I show you a house of a New Mexico house, so you know this is where it's placed. It's very southwest. It's built for the environment. If I show you a south that's I don't know where this is, but it could be the northeast. It could be Georgia, and there's a porch. There's a lot more concern about the environment and the weather, things like that, right? So if you look at these houses, the problem is they could exist anywhere. If you go to Rio Rancho, sorry, I'm not picking on Rio Rancho. If you go to Rio Rancho or some places in Beverly Hills or upstate New York, and they're very high-end exclusive neighborhoods, they would look like this, and it could be anywhere. And the double whammy of this is that they're not designed with any kind of real aesthetic. They're sort of all over the place. There's gates behind these communities. So let me explain also, the thing about these neighborhoods is that you do need a car to get everywhere, which you do in a lot of American cities anyway, which is fine. Outside of a handful of American cities, there's not really a lot of good transit, which I know we've had talks here at Nerd Nite about public transit. But needing a car is only part of the problem. Then the winding streets that are so prominent in these suburban areas, as opposed to the grid of even anywhere in Albuquerque proper or other like older American cities that are built on a grid. These curving, winding streets and these cul-de-sacs, they discourage walking and transit. So they're designed to like basically maneuver cars. They're not designed for people. A lot of cases, there's no sidewalks. There's private parks, there's private spaces, there's gates, and these heavily manicured lawns basically forbid interaction, the kind of interaction that you would have with a front porch. So you wouldn't feel welcoming going up to this house, for example. So then the last question is, are suburbs inherently bad? That's a tough one because I think they can be done better. I wish I had thought of having slides of good examples. I think good examples of those kinds of communities would incorporate a lot more mixed use retail schools built into these, and they're happening. But the idea of living 45 minutes, or in some cases like in Atlanta, like 2 hours outside of the city, to get into the city to do anything like work or go to school is really nuts. And the fact that what it leads to, well, I'll show you what it leads to is a whole host of problems. Single-use zoning is the highest carbon footprint, as opposed to even 2 to 3 story developments for apartments go a lot further to helping the carbon footprint than a single house zone. Anytime that you have a single house far outside of the city, what happens is if you have 3 people living there, you need 3 cars, because there's no other way to get out and do anything. And if you don't have a car, then you can't live in those places, so then you wind up living in places that are quote bad. You have shopping centers and strip malls, which are a different kind of dynamic than strolling down a street with a variety of stores. So it's not pedestrian friendly. There's economic segregation. Streets aren't designed for humans. They're designed for cars. So they're not as safe. They're not as pleasant. They cause more stress, which is probably could be another talk, with ugly buildings being very stress-inducing. There actually been studies about that. You have a lack of community because you don't know your neighbors, because you only see them in cars and passing. And there's no public transportation and no cohesive city planning. So all these things together create a problem where we don't know who our neighbors are. So what to do about that? And I think especially now, because this is not to get into something that's a little bit more subjective, but a lot of these laws that were removed based on the Civil Rights Act of 1968, we don't know if they're likely to come back. So it's very easy to imagine a world now, especially where this kind of economic segregation and legal discrimination could be possible. In fact, it still is, even today. I know we have stories of people who receive higher mortgage rates or not get mortgages at all based on the color of their skin in certain areas. That still happens even in spite of all these changes. So it's a very fine line that we're treading here. So some of the things we do about this to solve this are, this is my opinion, but community in this specific conversation and in general, community is more important than ever. Shopping local and shopping within the city is more important than ever. Supporting mixed income housing and understanding the history of this, because it's not going to go away by ignoring it. It's not a thing of the past. It's very relevant, as you saw some of these deeds that are still containing text. If you bought a house, even here in Albuquerque, they may contain certain language like this. So it's not ancient history. It's still very much present today. So I think I'll leave you with that. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So this big QR code, my main source a source that I like the best is the University of Richmond has a really interactive website where you could find redline maps of American cities. I'll leave this up here. It has information on redlining. It has information on basically just everything you can think about. And that's it. Any questions? Yes.
How this intersects with policies that further disenfranchise folks who are unsheltered homeless. So, like, I'm thinking like architectural designs, like putting something in the middle of a bench so that people can't sleep there, like slopes. Have you studied much of that?
Yeah, there's I used to have when I was in architecture school. He's still a good friend. He was a skateboarder, and he talked about what we call. I don't know if this is like the right term for it, but he called it violent architecture. So it would in some. This is not quite what you're asking, but it's related. There would be benches and curbs that would be designed to prevent skateboarders from doing grinds, so they would have like these knobs. And park benches, for example, also had that kind of thing where you just couldn't lie down in them. I think that design has a potential to incite more emotion and more than we realize. Like, I don't think I like brutalism. This is really random. I'm sort of going off a tangent here, but it has a potential for it feeling unwelcoming. So if you have like these cold open spaces, they're not going to be conducive to congregation. But yeah, I don't have. There's definitely such a thing as what I would call violent architecture. I haven't looked into it too much, except for the fact that. Well, let me give you an example. I know my good friend is here. I'm not going to single her out, but she lives in Nob Hill, and and in areas like that you'll see people walking through, passing through, and they could be of various. They could be any number of like economic situations, right? And it's normal. It looks normal. It doesn't look out of place. However, if you saw someone like that walking in, again, I'm sorry to pick out on Rio Rancho, but if you saw one walking through a cul-de-sac, it would stick out like a sore thumb, not because of who they were, but because it's not really conducive to that. So I think that the way houses could be more set back, the way they could be less welcoming, they could have no walkway. They have a driveway instead of a walkway. Definitely influence a lot of that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah. Any other questions? I think I will give it back to Nat.
Sweet.